So Square has evolved to go beyond much more than just a payments processor. There are many new lines of businesses, from delivery, loans, invoices, and we found out that those newer parts of the business actually comprised about 25% of adjusted revenue. So how much more do you plan on extending those platforms, and what other products do you plan on developing?
Sure. So I think it's been great to see the company go from the first problem that we solved for sellers was how to take a payment. And that's evolved into a pretty complex managed payment solution. They slowly pulled us up into becoming a point of sale solution for them, and what I really think of as a commerce platform. And then you're right, we started to build new products on top that really play to our unique advantages. So a product like Square Capital plays to the fact that we have access to data that allows us to really manage risk. And so that's just one part of the cohort of products that, as you said, now comprise a quarter of our adjusted revenue. So lots more to do there. I think we can continue to grow the core. I think we'll continue to move up market. We're starting to shift from offline into online through our platform. And then, of course, we can take all of that and go global. So a lot of white space in front of us, and exciting to see how that will drive our growth.
I think investors are pretty excited about those newer lines of business and that white space that show potentially more profitability. And we saw a huge jump in EBITDA margin from -6% last year to 16%.
Yeah.
How much higher can that number grow, and where would most of that increase in profitability come from?
Right. So we want to be mindful of both growing the business, but also doing it in a way that continues to expand margins. And I think we've been clear that we think about a mid-single-digit margin expansion pace is good from here. And I think that's the right balance of being able to take back into the business the other profits that we're throwing off and invest them back in for growth. In terms of where that margin expansion will come from, one will just be top line outperformance. So just like this quarter where we beat top end of guidance by $7 million, that clearly impacts profitability. But beyond that, we want to get more efficient in our operating line expenses. I think in particular areas like G&A. Clearly, we did a big build as we went public, and now we're reaping the benefits of that, but we don't need to keep building at that same pace. Jack talked a lot on the call yesterday about automation. Automation is important for our sellers, and we want to put that into the products that they use, but it's very important internally too to utilize automation to make ourselves more efficient. Examples would be using machine learning in risk, or using machine learning or AI in areas like support and sales. So lots of opportunity there, and I think that will continue to help grow the margin profile.
You mentioned global expansion earlier as a key point. You're currently in Japan, Australia, US, and Canada, but it's still largely domestic business. The vast majority of revenue comes from the US. So what can we expect the pace of global expansion to look like?
So I think for us, there has been just huge opportunity here in the US. When you're a business that goes after commerce, following GDP is clearly a good route to take. That said, I think a huge stride forward for Square in 2016, or it actually happened right at the end of 2015, was getting our hardware platform to a point where we could globally accept payments. And what I mean by that is being able to take both chip and contactless transactions. The US has been effectively the slow country in making that transition. So we didn't have to have it here in order to be able to take electronic payments. But now that we've shifted over to a world of chip and hence EMV, and I think more importantly, getting the US into using contactless, we've now created hardware that really unlocks the rest of the world. And my hope is that will help us move faster now.
And you've mentioned the UK before as a great place for Square to make inroads into, and you quietly have done so. What does the timeline look like there? Are there any challenges that are potentially causing a holdup?
So I think from the UK generally, we haven't made any formal announcements, and we're not going to comment today. However, when we look at the market, it clearly has all the hallmarks of a market that should be quite successful for Square. So big GDP, so following commerce, definitely a market that has a lot of small business, a market that tends to embrace technology, and it's a market where our brand is actually quite well recognized. So we like all the hallmarks of it. As I said, not quite ready to report on when we'll launch. For us, as we go into new markets, the technology itself is not per se the thing that slows us down. It's usually how we build the relationships with the financial system in the country, with the regulators in the country, and just making sure that they're comfortable that as Square comes to market, we're keeping the system safe and secure.
And as you're evaluating M&A opportunities for international expansion, how much of that is going into your considerations for accelerating expansion?
From an M&A perspective? We've historically not been a company that's done a lot of M&A. I think when we have done it, it's usually been to drive a product kind of beyond where the current roadmap is. Caviar is a great example, where we said we have a roadmap for how to provide a commerce platform for restaurants, but we're going to leap ahead and also do delivery, because delivery will bring more sales. I think other times we've done M&A, it's been more about adding talent into the mix, very kind of typical what Silicon Valley companies will do to get great engineers, great data scientists. So I think it'll be more of the same for us. I don't want to say that we would not use M&A to do something really big. We're always looking, and if something serendipitously came our way that really accelerated the business, we'd absolutely do it. Just right now, don't see something of that scale on the horizon.
And Square was one of the many tech companies earlier this month to sign a legal document condemning President Trump's executive order. How do you foresee developing legislation in this area potentially impacting your sellers, which are very diverse?
Sure. So the amicus brief around immigration was important for us to sign. We feel strongly that immigrants have brought a lot to this country, and in particular to our sellers, right? These are the people who found businesses, who work at the businesses, and our small businesses are the lifeblood of an economy. They have shown tremendous growth here in the US, as an example. So we want to make sure we stand for inclusion, and that's true of our company, so for the employees of Square, but also true to stand in front of our sellers as well and help be an aggregated voice for them. There's something amazing when you have millions of sellers on your platform, but you can kind of act as a powerful voice for what they care for and really be heard at our scale. And I think that was why it was important for us to take a stand there.
And Jack Dorsey has been pretty outspoken about this, mostly on Twitter, and we've reported that next week Trump is due to release a new revision of this executive order. Is Square, and if so, how, are you potentially working with the tech community to prepare for another response?
Yeah, I think for us, we go back to working with our sellers. So a great example where I think Jack has been very front-footed has been we did a piece on one particular seller, who effectively had come here as a Syrian refugee, Yassim Turo. It's a falafel store in Knoxville, Tennessee. He built up his business. Thankfully, he chose Square from the get-go. And he has gone on to actually employ a lot of immigrants in his business. But more importantly, really opened his doors to the community. And it wasn't just the community of immigrants, it was the community of the United States. So anyone who came into his store could be sure of an inclusive environment. And I think, we came to Yassim because we were really targeting our own campaign around how someone starting their own business that had a dream, Square was a perfect platform for them. But I think it just hit at the right time, and I think Jack has really utilized that story to make a broader point. And so I think it comes back to, for Square, how do we make it show how important it is for our sellers and not just make it about the tech community? It's much more about commerce broadly in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And along those similar lines, I think Square's story is really beginning to gain traction, especially among the investor community. It's not just selling a Stripe, a reader for credit cards, it's also building this ecosystem to make business easy for anyone. What's next in terms of really driving that story home, especially to investors?
Yeah, so in terms of what's next, I think we're excited as we look at this year. Jack talked about 3 components of the strategy: integration, automation, and platform. From an integration standpoint, I think we have real work to do to integrate many of the products that we have sitting on the platform. A good example would be pulling Caviar, our delivery product, into how do we help restaurants generally come on Square and utilize us for a full POS system too. I think there are other products. Square Cash is a good example where we can utilize the Square Cash platform, which is P2P, to think about how are people going to pay broadly at Square sellers or at other sellers. On the automation standpoint, again, we talked a lot on the call, I think, about machine learning. It has become the term du jour, but we were doing this right from the get-go at Square. It's how we've always managed risk. And I think there's a lot more we can do to make our products smarter. And then finally, from a platform standpoint, that is the shift going from offline to online. That opens up a massive market opportunity for us. Clearly, our sellers want to be omni-channel. They want to be able to sell in an e-commerce way as well as in their stores. And for us to be there as they make that transition, I think that's really going to unlock a lot of new addressable market and hence a lot of growth for the company.